All right, what's up everyone? Welcome back. If you kind of remember in my first video, I did feature this deck builder that I was able to create in Excel. I wanted to go ahead and bring this back to do the deck analysis. I'm still working on getting this live. It's been hard to find someone who knows coding to transform Excel from, itself to a easy formatted little piece on a website that people can just use. So until I get that figured out, or if you know someone that can do that, please feel free to put that in the comments below. But nonetheless, I don't want to waste any time. Let's go ahead and get started. So this is the deck builder. What I've done is just like in the deck list of the actual profile I did link right here on screen, you can pretty much enter every card individually, what role you think that fits in, and how many of that card you play in your deck. So obviously, like I said, we've talked about Alistair, Meltdown, Terraforming, etc., different cards being starters, different things like that for extenders, bombed, etc. So let's go ahead and just once you get everything in, we're just going to take a peek at the deck. There's a lot going on here, but what I am going to do is I'm just going to zoom in a little bit, and we're going to just take it one piece at a time. So we're going to go over, and then we're going to go up just a little bit. So I'm going to focus on our part right over here. Our chances of opening at least one of a card roll going first. So based on what we put into our deck, here's what we're looking at. We're looking at going first. That means in our 5-card hand, seeing one of those total starters, we have a 96% chance. For a Superior Extender, we got about 42% chance. For a defensive card, we also got about 85% chance. So what we're really saying is the bulk of what we're playing with here, we have a starter in our hand. We're going to have some type of defense in our hand to either back us up to make our plays go through, or to follow up on our opponent's turn to stop them from doing what they're doing. And we got a good chance of at least getting an extender, so that way we can pair that with our starters to keep moving through when you combine that with our Superior Extender and additional extender. Of course, we have our 2 engine requirements, being that of Red Eyes and Dark Magician, our bricks. So we got, about a little over 23% chance of seeing that, which is not great. But again, that's what happens when you got to play cards like that, play Gamma, things like that. And then our bombs are obviously Invocation, Schism. That's 3 cards there, so 1 in 3 chance that we see those. Not the end of the world, they're searchable as well, but hard opening them sometimes makes things easier. You don't have to worry about the discard with something like App Cologne or things like that. You don't have to worry about Alistair getting hit with Imperm, Ash, Droplet, and so on and so forth. Then, of course, let's look at our chances of getting at least 2 of those going first. So that's kind of the other reason that we have this here is what about our 2-card combos? Or what if we want to see the Dogmatika engine and the Invoked engine, or at least a combination of 2 different starters? So if one gets stopped, we can play through some stuff. So with the total amount of starters we have, we're looking at just about 76%. So that's still pretty good. About 3 out of 4 times, we're going to see always at least 2 starters, which is great. About half the time, we're going to be able to see a defensive card, and just a little bit of the time, we're going to see a Superior Extender. Of course, these numbers are either 0 if there's none in that role, and or very next to nothing should you have very minimal cards in that category. So let's go ahead and go back over just a little bit. Then we're going to go down just a little bit. And we're going to look at here our chances of opening at least one of each card roll going second. So we want to see, we know we're really set for going first, but what about going second? What are our chances? And there's a good bit that, you're going to see a higher percentage for each of these rolls, mainly because you have 6 cards in your starting hand as opposed to 5. So for our starters, you can tell we went from 96 to a little over 98%, which is great. Extenders, we're looking at about 55 instead of just about 50. And we got a 90% chance of seeing one of those defensive cards, which for the most part, as you could tell, we play things like Droplet, Tactics, Pankratops, the field spell to get Pankratops, and of course cards like There Can Be Only One. A lot of these cards are good going first or second to either set yourself up with floodgates or to flip those floodgates on your opponent's turn to kind of break their board and bring it down to size a little bit so you can play the game. And then of course, obviously your chance of seeing a brick goes up a little bit, as well as your bomb. And then the last piece we kind of wanted to look at here as we go over just a bit is the chances of seeing at least 2 of those going second in each roll. So what are we looking at here? We are looking at about an 85% chance still yet of seeing starters, which is a little bit better than that 79%. So again, that's really good. About 85% of the time, we're going to see 2 starters going second, which is really important for going to break through those boards. We're going to get about 60% of seeing that defensive card. And again, that's also important just because we play a lot of those defensive cards that can be used going second as well as going first. A little bit on the extenders and then a little bit on everything else. So that's kind of the breakdown of what we're looking at for each roll. That's where these numbers come from. When you're wondering about how the calculations are starting, we're looking at, like I said, 18 starters, same as our profile, 4 superior extenders, a couple engine requirements, a good amount of defensive cards, a little bit of bombs, and 1 additional extender in the form of Maximus. So that's the total rolls. The last couple little pieces here that we can always check is we're looking for a specific card in our deck. We can always look and see the chances of getting that off of a placeholder. Those are kind of things like Prosperity, Desires, Pot of Duality, right? So in this case, let's just say we want to see a way to get to Ecclesia specifically. We're not even going to say Servant. And then we're just going to say, we're going to refresh this by going to, let's say we want to look at 6 off of Prosperity. So what this is really telling us is in a 35 card deck that's left of our 5 card hand, we didn't see Ecclesia. If we look at the next 6 cards after that, what are our chances? Going first, about 44%. Going second, about 45%. Going second, obviously you got a 6 card opening hand, so your chance is just a little bit higher. And then for people that are just interested, just to kind of match things up for people who use the hypergeometric calculator, that's this guy right here. It's the same exact thing, just built into here. We can even check the math just to make sure. Let's go ahead and say we're looking for, we're trying to open 1 Ecclesia in a 5 card hand, and we're looking for out of 3 Ecclesia. So let's go ahead and find that number 3 right here. We're going to go ahead and punch that in. And our deck size is 40, so that's in a 40 count. But let's say, you know, again, just to make things a little bit more matching up, just so we can get that perspective, we're going to go ahead and change that to 35. And then let's say our hand size is 5, and we're looking at 1 of 3 Ecclesia. You got about 37% chance. So, you know, that's a 5 card hand. But what if we do the 6 card hand, matching it to Prosperity? We get that same thing there, 44% chance. So you're kind of, this is our placeholders. This is our regular hypergeometric calculator here. But that's the idea. That's the analysis of the deck right here. Jumping back just to see how we label things as starters. There's the list for you. And so that is it for the analysis. Let's go ahead and hop into the test hands and see if our test hands match up with the math that we're touting right here. So here we go. All right, let's get shuffled up here for our very first test hand. And we'll see what we're working with. So starting off here, we are working with Alistair, Nadir Servant, Tactics, Meltdown, and Tactics. We'll go ahead and do this. This is pretty great. Can't really complain about this. You'll just see the typical Invoked Dogmatika line with a bit of how the extra deck is utilized to its fullest capacity. So we'll go ahead, keep our hand a little bit visible down here just for you to see. We'll start by normal summoning our Alistair using the effect to add Invocation. I typically go this route because if they droll you on Meltdown, then your turn is pretty much over. If they droll you here, you at least have Macabre Pass and can rip a card out of their hand with Tactics. So not the end of the world there, but we're just going to assume that for the sake of this test hand, they don't have any interruptions. We want to see what this deck can do all the way going first. So we'll link Alistair away into our Almirage, and then we will link the Alistair away, or sorry, the Almirage away into our secure Gardna. From here, we'll preemptively do our Invocation, banishing our Alistair and our secure Gardna to summon our Macabre. I'm going to do it in defense just to avoid things like Lightning Storm, all that good stuff. We'll use Invocation, put it back into the deck, add our Alistair back into our hand, give that a quick shuffle. From here, we'll go ahead and use Nadir Servant. So I'm going to do something a little bit different maybe that you've seen or not seen before, but we'll start by just dumping App Clone, and you can search either Ecclesia or Maximus here. it doesn't matter really. For the sake of playing around Nibiru, you already have the Makaba on board. I'm going to take just Maximus just for the sake of making the steps a little bit quicker. So we'll go ahead and add Maximus to our hand. And then in a new chain, we'll use Apclone's effect to add our Shadal card and discard a card. So in this case, what we're going to add is our main target, which is Shadal Schism, that I do not see. There it is. And we're going to discard the same thing. We're going to discard the Shadal Schism here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to special summon the Maximus by banishing the Almirage. And then we'll use Maximus effect to dump 2 from the extra deck. In this case, we're going to dump Shadal Construct. And there's a few different options here, but my favorite off the Maximus play alone is to do Construct and Predaplant Chimera Rafflesia. So we'll go ahead and dump those both into the grave. Construct is going to trigger to add our Shadal Schism back to our hand. And then we will set 1. And then we will pass. And on our opponent's turn, Predaplant Chimera Rafflesia is going to trigger, allowing us during their standby phase to add a fusion from our deck to our hand. So we're going to add Red Eyes Fusion. And then after that, we're going to have the Makaba negate. We have a good follow-up in terms of Red Eyes Fusion, Alistair, Tactics, and we have the Schism if we want to go ahead and banish a Dark and banish a Shadal monster to go ahead and put our Shadal Winda on the board, locking our opponent out for special summons. So that's what you can get with basically just Alistair plus a way to the Dogmatika engine or a way to Maximus. Obviously, the only difference is if you don't have Servant, you're just going to have to discard and have one less card in hand because you can't add and discard with Apclone and then dump an extra Shadal after that. So that's our first test hand. Go ahead and shuffle back up and we'll go ahead and demonstrate our second test hand. Let's see what we're working with. We got another Tactics, nice, Schism, Invocation, Ecclesia, and Prosperity. So what I will go ahead and showcase for this test hand is the first thing is first. We have that total of 18 starters, like I mentioned. We technically open 2 if we count Prosperity in that category. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and Prosperity first, just to demonstrate how strong Prosperity really is when we look for 6 cards. So we're going to go ahead and get rid of the Titaniclad since we have a way to our Dogmatika engine already. We'll go ahead and get rid of Omega. For the sake of this, we'll get rid of Almirage and Secure Gardener since we still play the Moon Maiden in our extra deck. We will get rid of the Construct, and we will go ahead and get rid of one of the 2 Invoked Fusions. This is up to your choice depending on what you're playing. If you're playing Sword Soul, I keep Purgatrio in, but overall, you're usually probably going to want to keep Algides. It's probably the more versatile piece there. So we're going to go ahead and banish these 6 face down. Then we're going to see what we got going on here. Alistair, Terraforming, Invocation, Maximus, Prosperity, and Meltdown. So off of Prosperity alone, we're basically seeing 1, 2, 3 technically additional starters if you want to lump Prosperity in there, but the goal of Prosperity is to see something else, so we're not going to count that. We see the bomb here in the form of Invocation, an additional extender in the form of Maximus, and in this case, I think I'll just demonstrate a very simple line just because we can go ahead and do a little bit different plays here, but we're going to take the Alistair, we're going to put these on the bottom. Of course, this would get the exact same line we just showed with the Dogmatika and Invoked line, but I'm going to show something a little bit different about how we use the Dogmatika package on occasion. So we're going to normal the Alistair, we're going to take an Invocation, we're going to search because why not? We're going to link this away, we're going to special summon the Artemis, and then from here we are going to special summon the Ecclesia, and we are not going to use the Ecclesia effect. The only thing that Dogmatikas lock you out of in terms of the extra deck for Ecclesia and Maximus is when you use their effects to do something other than putting themselves on the field. So when you use Ecclesia's effect to search, that's when you get locked out. When you use Maximus's effect to dump, that's when you get locked out. Otherwise, they're just free special summons. So we're going to go ahead and link 2. And we're going to make our Predaplant, Verte, Anaconda. We're going to go ahead and do our Invocation. Banishing, we can do a couple different ways. I like keeping the extra deck monster engraved. In this case, should we draw something like Servant a little bit quicker, we're going to banish those 2. for our Macabre. And the one thing to note is, again, typically, if you're a little bit hesitant and you're scared that your opponent has nib, you can obviously do the other Invoked Dogmatika lines first, because we've already summoned. This is going to be our 5th summon here on Macabre, and in this case we don't have a monster in hand. However, typically you will, and if they don't have it, either way we still can simply recycle that invocation that we used, add back that Alistair, and if they hadn't nibbed us here, they are paying for it because we now have the guaranteed monster negate. But typically you don't have to worry about that because we're always putting a negate of some kind on our 5th summon. So, and then we're going to use Verte Anaconda's effect, pay our cost by paying 2,000 life points, dumping Red Eyes Fusion, and then resolving by dumping Dark Magician and Red Eyes to the graveyard to fusion summon our Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. And that's kind of the typical end board that you'll see when you have Alistair plus a superior extender, or in cases like Ecclesia where it can fill multiple roles, being a starter or an extender. We now have an Omni Negate that can't be targeted or destroyed, and a Omni Negate as well in the form of Macabre, since we also have a monster spell trap in hand. And we still haven't used Tactics. Again, if our opponent had something, we have ways to rip more cards out of their hand and just keep playing the game. So that's it for test hand number 2. Macabre Dragoon is a pretty standard end board. Of course, if you also open Servant, then you could have Winda on top of that. And see what we're working with here. So we got Light Stage, Meltdown, Ecclesia, There Can Be Only One, and Prosperity. An absolutely insane opening hand. This is about as good as it will get. So we're going to go first, and we're going to assume that our opponent doesn't have any interruptions. So we're going to activate Meltdown. We're going to add Alistair. And then we're going to go ahead and do Light Stage. I like doing it this way because keeping Light Stage lets us pop back row and different things like that as the game goes along. We're going to add Korribane. And then we will special our Korribane since we have no monsters or only Trick Stars. And we will normal Alistair, use the effect. Go ahead and search Invocation. From there, we can do a couple things. We can go straight to Dragoon, which I'm actually going to do in this case, or we could even just link one in the event that we go into Almirage, and then should we see Maximus later on if Verte gets negated. But I feel pretty confident about this hand, so we're going to go ahead and do that. We're going to Invocation, banishing the Alistair and the Korribane for our Macabre. And then this is going to sound kind of weird, but I'm actually going to leave the Alistair banished temporarily, and then we're going to go ahead and just use Verte. And we're going to dump the Red Eyes Fusion as cost, and then resolve and dump our Dark Magician and our Red Eyes Black Dragon. And so the main reason I'm doing all of this is my goal is off of Prosperity to see as few cards in deck left as possible to also hit a card like Nadir Servant so we can have Dragoon, Macabre, and Winda, which is a pretty realistic order given what we've done here so far. So we're going to go ahead and use Prosperity. We're going to banish 6 cards. We're going to go ahead and banish, let's do Secure Gardener and Almirage. We don't need those anymore. We don't need Omega. Titanic Clad, we already have the Dogmatika engine set and good to go. We can get rid of the Purgatrio and keep the Algides. And then we don't need Chimera Rafflesia simply because we already have used the Red Eyes Fusion and we don't play a second target in this case. We don't play a Magical Eyes Fusion or Super Poly or anything spicy like that. So we did that. Let's look at our top 6. Right there it is, Nadir Servant, right off the top. Love to see it. Tactics, another There Can Be Only One, Ecclesia, Alistair, and another Servant. So the world is our oyster here. We can take whatever we want, depending on how you feel. You could take Tactics, depending if they've stopped you or not yet, or Servant. I'm just going to take Servant. And I actually realized that we forgot to resolve our Dragoon after paying. So we're going to put that on the board. Then we're going to resolve Servant. We're going to dump our App Clone. And I'm just going to add a second Ecclesia here because why not? Then we're going to use App Clone's effect. We're going to add Schism. And then we're going to discard one of the 2 Ecclesia because I think that's perfectly fine. And then we can set 2. And yes, you're only looking at 1 card in hand, but I think our 2 Floodgates in forms of There Can Be Only One and Shaddoll Schism very much so make up for it. You're looking at a Omni Negate in form of Dragoon, a Monster Negate right now in the form of Macabre, a Winda lock, and a There Can Be Only One, locking your opponent only into 1 type. And you'll notice our board right now is Machine, Plant, and Spellcaster. And typically what I like to do is on my opponent's turn, I'll usually do Schism first, getting rid of the App Clone and the Dark Magician to help try to play around IDP, even though Ecclesia is sitting in the graveyard nonetheless. And we will go ahead and put our Winda on. I like doing that first because usually a lot of times with Dragoon plus whatever else we're working with here, that is more than enough to take care of things. But should it really not be enough after that and they try to negate Winda or do Dark Ruler no more or whatever, there can be only one, pretty much cleans it up, and then I'll typically just get rid of the Winda and leave our Dragoon there, and then we have our crazy follow-ups, or discard the Ecclesia for whatever we need. And then after that, we're still sitting on an amazing board, being able to lock back row and negate anything, pop whatever we want. I will see you all next week. New videos every Sunday. Thank you all again so much for watching. Later.